Now, the question of what to do with Western volunteers who joined the Islamic State is one that is vexing policymakers and sparking public debate in many nations. This is especially so with those women dubbed ISIS brides that married militants.
Right, and today is going to court. A U.S. federal court in Washington set to start hearing the case of Hoda Muthana, an Alabama woman who joined ISIS 4 years ago. Her family is challenging the Trump administration's declaration that she is no longer an American citizen, barring her and her 18-month-old son from re-entering the United States. Joining us to look a little bit closer at that issue that really is only just getting started, Jarrett Blanc. He's a senior fellow in geoeconomics and strategy at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. He's also former principal deputy special representative for Afghanistan and Pakistan in the Obama administration. Jarrett, great to have you with us. So, most basic question, is this an issue for the court in your eyes, or one that for the president, for the executive branch?
It's absolutely an issue for the courts. The question of whether or not an individual has a claim to citizenship is an issue of fact and law, which can only be resolved through a rigorous and transparent legal process. It's essential that this question of citizenship not be handled by tweet or by fiat, and more than that it not be be handled by tweet. And at the best case, that's what it looks like right now.
And but let's look at it as more of a policy issue, Jarrett. We do have this circumstance. It's actually less pressing for the U.S. than countries like the U.K. and France. What to do with these Westerners, not just women, of course, some militants that actually took part in ISIS operations. What to do with them, those that want to return to their home countries. What does your experience serving in places like Afghanistan tell you?
Well, I think you're exactly right, and that's actually why I'm so perplexed that the administration seems to be contorting itself into a pretzel to deny this one individual's citizenship. There are reportedly about 800 non-Syrians being held by by Syrian forces allied with the United States and NATO who need to go somewhere. And in many cases, what needs to happen is that they go back to their home countries in Europe, where they can be charged with crimes if they've committed them, handled for whatever security or terrorist threat they might pose, and done so in a way that doesn't in any way infringe upon their human rights. The United States should be setting an example in this case by allowing this individual, I think, to come home and face justice, as we are encouraging our allies and partners to do.
What do you think that process, beyond the courts, beyond facing justice, should be like? Is there a way that the United States can take back these people, these former ISIS fighters or so-called ISIS brides, and help reintegrate them back into society? Well, you know, I think that there probably are instances where individuals can be reintegrated, perhaps after serving a prison term. I think the urgent question right now, as the United States draws down its forces in Syria, is what do you do with these 800 or so foreign individuals so that they're not either released to the world where they might pose a threat or handled in a way which would be a serious human rights concern. And for those who are from the United States or from Western Europe, again, the simple solution would be to try to find a way to bring them home where they can face justice, and then address the question of reintegration, I think, later on down the road. You know, I find it very ironic because the Trump administration seems obsessed over burden sharing, over what are really pennies when it comes to the military forces in South Korea or NATO, but at the same time as sending out messages that it would consider bringing some of these people into Guantanamo, non-Americans into Guantanamo. So it's okay for us somehow to be the world's jailer, but not to pay relatively modest amounts for international security arrangements. It just doesn't make any sense, and this is yet another example of the administration not having a coherent worldview.
Jarrett, how do you answer those who say, it's easy to say bring them home and face justice, but there are those, perhaps like this woman, who it's not clear that they may have committed a crime per se or a crime on the books, but they did identify with a foreign enemy of the United States, and perhaps just the best way for them to face justice is to sit in a Syrian jail or refugee camp for a few years?
it's actually against international law to subject somebody to the possibility of torture. So that's really not an option for us or our allies. I believe that in this instance, the individual in question has acknowledged criminal liability and is willing to face justice. I do agree with you, though, that more generally in these 800 cases, there will certainly be individuals who are deeply troubling, but perhaps not criminal. And those are instances that again, in my experience, trying to close U.S. detention facilities in Afghanistan, you just have to work through them case by case. There are solutions. You've got to find the legal and diplomatic solution. By the United States seeming to try to put itself out of this problem-solving category and rule out the return of this one individual, I think it makes it more rather than less difficult for us to play a constructive role across the entire basket of cases.
Jarrett, briefly, in your experience in Afghanistan, is there crossover from what you saw, or is this ISIS situation really a new case?
Well, there are certainly important differences, one of which is that in the Afghanistan situation, these were individuals who were being held in U.S. detention, and so we had a very direct set of responsibilities to figure out what to do with them when we wanted to close the detention facilities. There's obviously a couple of levels of remove here because these are not individuals in U.S. detention, but there are, I think, still some very important similarities as we think through the overlapping security, judicial, and human rights interests that affect both the entire category of cases and each of the cases on an individual basis.